more appropriate that we have a quick overview from individuals that have been participating in the Kansas Promise Scholarship. And so those are going to be representatives from the Kansas Independent College Association, Kansas Technical Colleges, our community colleges, as well as the Board of Regents. So we are going to start off with Mr. Matt Lindsay. He is the president of the Kansas Independent College Association. Welcome for the first time this session, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Good to be back with you. I am Matt Lindsay, president of the Kansas Independent College Association. You have my testimony, and for this part, I'm just going to focus on the last piece mostly here on participation for 21-22. When you all passed this bill and we were debating it, I noted that for the private colleges, associate's degrees and certificates are not our bread and butter. We have those programs. We have a few schools who have a lot of those programs. But for the most part, this was not a program that was targeted primarily at us. I knew at the time, and so far my forecast has borne that out, is we would be a small part of this program. I think a small part, but an important part. Obviously, I'm proud of the schools we have and what they do. And we are very grateful that you all remembered to include private colleges in this work because it's about serving all Kansans, about growing our economy, and we're glad to participate. So you'll see that we did not have nearly as many students using the Promise Scholarship this year as our friends in the community colleges and the technical colleges. We had some challenges early in implementation, which slowed us down in getting these programs or these scholarships off the ground. But nonetheless, you can see on the backside of my testimony the 7 schools that have approved Promise Scholarship programs and the numbers of enrollment. As I think I would have expected, the highest percentage is in healthcare right now. But I expect that IT and information security program to grow. We have a lot of approved programs there that just haven't had any takers on the scholarship yet. That's a quick summary for us. I'm going to defer a lot of the nuts and bolts and the marketing piece to Heather Morgan at the community colleges. We worked with them to get this up and going, and I think her testimony covers that pretty well.
So, committee, are there any questions at this time for Mr. Lindsay? Seeing none, thank you so much. Next up, we have Jim Gannant. Jim, welcome back from last week.
Good to be back. Well, hello, everybody. Our last good spring day for a while. So the Kansas Technical Colleges appreciate having these resources. As I conferred with my colleagues after the meeting last week, I can report to you that they all implemented using the scholarships last fall. No one waited. They made good use of them. Where there was a slowdown, and my college was one where there was a bit of a slowdown, it's because I counseled my financial aid people to be very careful because of that clawback provision. And I was concerned about the liability it could place on us with students, so we spent a little extra time with counseling. I also want to point out that the KBOR staff was excellent to work with on the program with the tech colleges. They worked with us. Scott was in touch with us often. How's it going? What do you need help with? Do you need more funds? When do you need funds? Common questions he shared with all of us so we could work with them. And they really helped us implement the program successfully. All of us had between in the 40s up into the 70s and 80s as far as numbers of students who use this. From the testimony, you'll see that some of our concerns related to the clawback provision, which is addressed with 340. We're also a little bit concerned about the gap, and again, that's been taken care of in 340, but part of our concern relates to the impact of the pandemic the last few years and the slowdown of secondary students entering post-secondary ed. We've seen some of those trends. Again, this is a good resource. Getting rid of that gap year issue helps us use it. 340 also addresses the ability for us to add additional programs. As I mentioned the other day, we had some students approach our financial aid people. They were wanting to use the Promise Act, but it was in a program we had not identified. So those changes are also appreciated. We saw, and I think the chair has seen this in some of the comments she's heard from people, we did see a large increase in people completing the financial aid application in order to access these funds. So those application rates, which we all want to go up, did go up. Also, all of the tech colleges experienced headcount enrollment increases last fall, and I'm sure some of that was due to the Promise Act, so thank you. In looking through 340 and then also in looking through the Regent's testimony, we would concur with almost all of the Regent's comments related to 340 that you'll hear later. One of the concerns we had, there's a comment about the tech colleges having very defined service areas. They are defined. The Regents have defined those. What we have in many cases is shared territory, either between tech colleges, as in my case, I share a county with Salina Tech, or with the community college. But everybody does have well-defined service areas. You'll also may notice there are differences in tuition costs among all of the two-year colleges and the independent colleges. In the case of the tech colleges, often our tuition is a little higher, but again, none of us have taxing authority, where the community colleges get about $250 million a year in taxing authority funds. So that explains some of the difference. But overall, I think on behalf of all of the two-year colleges and the independent colleges that are participating, this has become a very valuable tool. In my case, over 75% of my graduates stay in my service area. So this reinforces how well we can recruit, get people through the program and into the area job market. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have for Jim? Yes, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your report today. You mentioned that another use of this program might be to retain students, and as an example, you gave maybe increasing benefit for those who are performing well academically. Are there other things, or do you have more specifics, or?
This was actually an idea brought up by Sherry Utash at Wichita Tech that I agreed with, and several of us do, is how we can use this as a tool for someone. We may give them partial award in their first semester, but if they prove themselves and they return for the second semester, a third semester, they've showed that satisfactory academic progress, engagement, et cetera, how we use this more and more as that retention tool to keep them coming to complete and to go into the job market. So I think those are some ideas that might shape the future of the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, other questions? Yes, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On those lines, what specifically is keeping you from doing that currently with the retention, like doing the lower?
I think it's more because it's not maybe stated in the legislation that we have that we could do that spread, that kind of a range. And so many times our staff, we're going to award the student this much this time, that means they're going to get this much next time. Part of it's just an internal mechanism, but to also know it's okay for us to do that.
So I'm going to follow up on that track, because when the student signs the commitment to be a Promise Scholar, they say that they will stay in the program until they graduate or earn that certificate. If they don't, then it becomes a loan that they must pay back. So by only partially awarding the funding up front, how would you address that clawback issue?
It's a very good point. What we often see in many of the institutions is that first-time student, when they're going into a technical program, generally they're more motivated than if they're a general studies major. And I've worked for universities, community colleges. Sometimes, you get a student that's not sure why I'm going to college, but I'm going to college. So number one, because of the way you drafted the legislation and targeting programs that matter to the workforce, you've reduced some of that risk. If my institution was closer to a border, I would be more concerned, because so many of the students may work in Kansas but live in the other state, or vice versa. So again, for many of the border institutions, whether it's a community college or a tech college, that's where they start going, I want to be careful with this. I have less worry, but also I know with some of our students, if I have the ability through our financial aid people to tell the student, thank you for coming back the second semester, we're going to increase the amount of this scholarship by even $250, that's just more motivation for that student to keep driving.
To that, I would simply say the way in which you do that is with your funds. So if they were to be receiving let's just say $1,500 that first semester, that is what they were eligible for. It might be because they were partial Pell, whatever, or just the cost of the program. So if they are successful, strong student, seem committed, and they are there for early pre-enrollment, then as an institution, you can reduce what essentially would be their clawback burden if they weren't successful by awarding them a scholarship, and that simply reduces that obligation of what they receive from the state.
Understand?
So I think from that standpoint, if you are wanting, the carrot is the scholarship. The initial step through is make sure FAFSA, so we can determine if some of that funding is federal. But at no time, there is nothing that prohibits any institution from awarding a merit scholarship. So I would love to see you do that in the second semester. It may be scholarship, it may be food service pass, it might be something very tangible, because food is still going to be an issue for a student, but the food isn't covered in the Promise Scholarship. Could use some of that for Pell, but that means I simply have to come up with other funds to pay that tuition.
And we're all always looking for any things that help us with retaining and keeping those students, especially in some of these programs where there's an internship, they get a job offer before they complete. And we don't want them to turn down the job, but how do we mesh those things together? But thank you for your advice.
Well, and on that, I think we have to, as institutions, and I say that meaning community colleges, technical colleges, as well as our privates, we have to have that working relationship with the workforce out there to say, one of two things has to happen. You let them work part-time while they complete, or you pay off that scholarship to the state. Either one is fine with me. I would always prefer that they have the credentials. But I wanted to have this circle back to an issue that you did talk about with regard to where they work and live. Because technical colleges now can take a student that lives out of state that applies, and when they apply, then they become an in-state student. So tell me, what did the technical colleges do when they initiated this program for fall semester to make sure that we didn't actually have Oklahoma, Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri residents paying or receiving this, and they hadn't lived 3 years consecutively?
So first, I'm going to assume that my colleagues as presidents instructed their staff to go through the training on this provided by KBOR, went through the regulations, and they adhered to it. I'm not aware of out-of-state students receiving the scholarship. I only had 3 out-of-state students at Manhattan Tech last year. I know they didn't get it. It could be more of an issue at Northwest Tech. Ben has more Colorado students coming to him. But I'm not aware of an issue, but I will glad to double check on that.
Okay. Well, obviously, we're going to hear from KBOR as well, and we always have our friends at Legislative Post Audit that can step in for us. Committee, any other questions that you can think of? I do have one quick question. What is the most expensive program that's being offered right now at the technical institutions?
Probably dental hygiene.
Is that more expensive than the pilot program?
I'm not aware of the pilot program cost. That's at the community college. Dental hygiene, I did have it. I closed it down because it was costing me too much money, but the colleges that have that, that's a fairly expensive program, but it also is a pretty high wage when they get put into the job market.
In fact, I guess what I'm wanting to know, not what is the most expensive cost to you, but to a student? Is it also going to be hygiene because of the tools they need to have?
The tools, the background check, the licensure, the uniforms.
Okay.
Similar in lineman training, which Pratt and I have, the tools, the gear, et cetera. And that varies program to program. With the colleges, for instance, welding, you'll see a wide array of tuition and fee costs. but many of us include the tools, the clothing, et cetera, but also then the licensure, the ability to sit for the credentials.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Senator Petty, did I see that you had a question? Just a what? Oh, okay, all right. Seeing no further questions, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Jim. Next up, we have Heather Morgan, Executive Director of Kansas Community College Trustees. Thank you for being with us again today, Heather.
Thank you. I hope everyone's been able to pull up their testimony online. I tried to put a lot of the history of the bill within my testimony and kind of how we got from the day the bill was actually enacted into law to implementation of the bill and then where we are today. At the top of my testimony, you'll see that a logo was created. The Kansas community colleges and independent colleges immediately started working together to fund a marketing campaign. It was primarily funded by the community colleges, but we wanted to make sure that students across the state were aware of the scholarship and thought that a logo was the right way to go. We engaged a professional marketing firm out of Manhattan to help us with this. The dollar spends that you see in the testimony for marketing are actually the social media and the YouTube ad buys. If we had more technology in this room, I would show you a YouTube video that we created promoting the scholarship, but all of the marketing materials were created in both Spanish and English, and we tried to push those out through all sorts of variety of mechanisms, both through our associations, but also through our colleges over the summer. We met with K-12 at various conferences over the summer and also promoted the scholarship. It was a very heavy lift for KBOR staff and for our colleges, and we do thank KBOR for working with us and collecting the data on this scholarship so that we can all track it going forward. The data team at KBOR does remarkable work given how many colleges and information technology people they have to deal with to try to pull all this together. In the testimony, I go on and talk about who got the scholarship. So there are a variety of hiccups and clarity that needs to be sought in Senate Bill 340. Nothing that is insurmountable, and I think Senate Bill 340 does a great job of addressing the concerns that were brought up. Things like what does the word completed mean? Became very difficult early on in the scholarship, and we've gotten through all of that. So one of the things, again, just as a reminder, the scholarship, Senator Sullentrup wasn't on the committee last year, so just for his benefit at least, the scholarship covers books, tuition, fees, and supplies for students in the qualified program. So within the 4 areas of study that were designated in the bill, which were advanced manufacturing and building trades, early childhood and elementary education, information technology and cybersecurity, and then physical and mental health care, you can see on my testimony that for community colleges, 51% of our students were studying in that healthcare bucket. We had 24% in the advanced manufacturing and building trades, 14% in the IT and cybersecurity, and then 10% in early childhood and elementary education. So like President Janot, I think that there is a tremendous opportunity for growth in IT, but specifically in education, making sure that our superintendents across the state know that someone can get the first 2 years of their teaching degree paid for as long as the institution that they attend has a 2+2 or an articulation agreement with that 4-year college. So what's a 2+2 agreement? Essentially, it means that if you go to the community college and get your associate's degree, you can complete at the university with only 2 more years. You're not looking at a 5 or 6 year college experience. And with student teaching, that's really important because it kind of takes the last semester of college out of the equation in terms of taking other classes. So there's opportunity for growth there, and we're excited to continue marketing that. Melissa Rooker and I have been talking about ways to use the Children's Cabinet to also push it out to our early childhood friends, and they're having some workforce conversations even this week about how to improve the early childhood pipeline. I also included in the testimony the largest programs in which we awarded scholarships. So roughly across all of our systems, 650 promised scholarships have been awarded. About 500 of those were from community colleges. So unlike some scholarships where there's a deadline and the whole process stops, that's not the way it works for the Promised Scholarship. So I was talking to our president yesterday, and she said, we've got another Promised Scholarship. They just applied today. So they can apply at any time. And because our classes often are not on a semester time frame, we have 8-week classes, we can sort of get applications and students plugged in pretty quickly. So from the list that I provided in my testimony, you can see that RNs, associate degree nurses, ADNs as we like to call them, 58 ADNs are getting their nursing school paid for. We had 30 LPNs Interestingly, I don't know if I put it on here, we only had one certified nurse assistant who applied. A certified nurse assistant's a 5-hour class. So they would have had to take their CNA class and then like a first aid class or a CMA class or something like that for it to qualify. But we are really seeing sort of our upper level, high demand, high wage jobs using the scholarship. One of the things that I wouldn't have expected is EMT and paramedics. We had 20, medical coding 13, elementary education 19, welding 18, electric power lineman, which is one of the most expensive programs. We had 12, automotive technology 10. When we're talking about expensive programs, I think that the private pilot program would probably be the most expensive. I don't know exactly how much it is, but then it would drop down to things like electric power lineman and dental hygiene, which would be some of the more expensive programs. Moving along to the second page of my testimony, which I smartly put page numbers on today instead of last week, so hopefully I can guide you better. At the top of the sheet, it kind of talks about the difference in the price of the programs across the state. And to Jim's point, people are funded differently, so it's not to say that this is bad or good, this is to say what it is. So when you see the different amounts of awards by sector or by college, it's because of this. The programs cost different amounts. So if you're an electric power lineman student, or if you're an associate degree nurse student, you may be getting a bigger Promise scholarship because your program is more expensive. So I've included that just so you can see the range of program costs. And this came from Kansas Degree Stats. So if you say, well, I know this college offers this program and they're not on the sheet, I tried to make sure I kept it apples to apples and only pulled up if they use the same title in the Kansas Degree Stats system. Because I have 19 colleges to wrangle and guide, I decided just to pick one of the colleges and put some statistics in from that college into the testimony. So at the institution that I've included, there were 52 applications for the Promise Scholarship. Of the 52 applications, 22 were awarded. 9 of the 52 people who applied found out that they were fully Pell eligible because they completed the FAFSA. That is the victory that we were all hoping for, was that people who didn't think that they could afford college now were encouraged because they saw college at no cost to me. And they applied and were able to get their education fully covered by the federal Pell Grant. 13 of the students of the 52 who applied were found ineligible. 3 of them, their program was not an eligible Promise covered program. And after Tamara briefs us on the bill, we'll get another opportunity to talk about the changes that will help in the new bill. 1 of them fell into the donut hole, as you'll hear about later, and then 9 were just for other reasons. So another reason that someone might have been ineligible is they completed the FAFSA, but you can complete a FAFSA and not have and still have what they call error codes. And an error code means you didn't provide either accurate information or you did not provide complete information. And so one of the things that we've got to address in 340 is in technical financial aid language, getting that all straightened out, because if you did not provide either accurate or complete information, you could not be awarded the scholarship. For this college, they had 8 scholarships that were currently under review. 17 of the scholarships had been paid out. So for example, I talked to a parent, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, my cell phone number is on our marketing material. So I deal with students and parents. And one parent said, I want to apply now for my child to get into nursing school next year. And I said, well, there's nothing prohibiting you from getting in line. So we do have some institutions that have already had applications waiting for a semester that's yet to come. So of the scholarships, they paid out, this institution had 22 scholarships. They paid out $22,000 this fall. They're projecting to award another $40,000 of scholarships through the end of the year. Now you might be thinking, well, why is it not just double? First semester should cost the same as second semester, right? Because we're covering supplies and tools, most every one of our programs is going to be more expensive in the first semester and less expensive in the second semesters, some significantly so. There may be $5,000 worth of tools you have to buy and supplies to start that program, and then that cost is a one-time cost and it won't be reoccurring. 2 people were declined awards, so they were just totally ineligible. And then 4 people need to sign their Promise Scholarship obligation. That obligation, as you recall, guarantees that the student will live and work in Kansas for 2 years post when they complete their program. I thought it would be intuitive to include a little bit of the marketing data that we received back from our marketing campaign. Because as we think about so many of the things we do in this building, we never know how it hits the people that we're trying to help. So we did a 2-phase campaign. The first phase was sort of like right after you all got done with the bill. We said we want to have a media splash. We don't have all the details worked out, but let's get something out on social media. So with that campaign, we only spent $3,000 on the ad buy. We spent some more money on the campaign development, but for $3,000, we had 97,000 people reached and 500, over 500,000 impressions. So an impression is when you're scrolling through Facebook on your phone, you might see something, but you don't stop there long enough to read it. That's an impression. You saw it, but you didn't read it. So we had 97,000 people who actually were on the ad long enough to see it. You can see by the number of parents for Spanish and English that we reached. And so we really had 3 different ads. We had an ad targeting parents, we had an ad targeting students, traditional age students, and then we had an ad targeting adults who are looking for a new career or a career change or to upskill. So we had 3 different sort of campaigns going on with 3 different ads. We ran our social media ads on Facebook and Instagram, and you can see 76% of the people we reached were through Facebook. And you can see by audience, by parents, by adults, and by teens how we were reached. So you can see our young adult students are using Instagram much more than their parents. Quite frankly, some of our colleges then went and did Snapchats and all other sorts of platforms that probably none of us know what they are. But we have people at our colleges as that's what they do. And so we just started sort of at the high level. We're going to use Instagram and Facebook. You can see that the demographics of who we reached. And then we went to a second phase, a phase 2. And in that phase 2, we wanted to really target the different sectors of occupation. So rather than, hey, no cost to you tuition, this was like, come and work in education. Are you interested in advanced manufacturing or building trades? And we really had, I think there was then 9 different ads we ran on social media, really trying to target the different career fields and then for them to work in Kansas. So you can see on that second campaign, we reached over 1 million people through impressions, 127,000 people through seeing the ad, and then 4,800 clicks. I can tell you the analytics on my website, the KACCT website, where we created a Promise Act landing page, skyrocketed during the time that we launched the program. On our second phase of our program, we also expanded into YouTube, and you can see that over 53% of the traditional age students saw the Kansas Promise Scholarship ad on YouTube. Skipping right ahead, I'm going to go to page 9 of the testimony. We mentioned the 4 program areas that were in the original bill last year. At conference, there was also added that each institution could choose 1 more program area. We'll deal with the language of program area in the bill we're going to talk about later. But for the initial program year, which we are currently in, on the spreadsheet, I list the programs that each institution chose as in demand in their area. So for Pratt, it was automotive technology, Cali criminal justice, Neosho paralegal, Butler fire science, Highland diesel tech, Hutch fire science, Coffeyville fire science, Independence veterinary nursing, which would be like a vet tech program. Dodge diesel. Johnson County had the most unique one, which was sign language interpreter, is their other program of study, which Johnson County has one of the only programs in the state and is very well renowned for that, especially with the School for the Deaf there in Olathe. Garden had criminal justice, clout, ag production, KCK fire science, Colby farm and ranch management, Labette graphic design technology, Allen criminal justice, Fort Scott ag mechanic equipment, that's also known as the John Deere program. Barton natural gas technician, and then Seward grain elevator operations. I think that list of programs is really illustrative of the economic differences across our state and the different workforce needs. Also in this table, KBOR initially gave allocations based upon how many technical education students were in these different program areas and awarded that amount. Then they, as Jim referenced, Scott was in constant conversation with us about, well, what do you think you really need? Do you need more? Do you need less? All of our community colleges actually needed less, and I'll tell you the reason why. Some of our people got off to a little slow start for similar reasons to Jim, but also because we have some of our institutions that have tremendously high Pell rates. So if we have a high Pell rate, which means you're serving a very at-risk and impoverished population, we are going to award less Kansas Promise Scholarship because the Pell Grant is going to pay for more of their cost of education. So then we had the schools estimate for spring, and that's on there what we think we're going to award for the year, which is just about $1.9 million. I could have put some numbers in that next column, but let me just say it varies by college, their average award, because my data, some people small cell suppressed things, and so it was a little bit difficult to figure that out. But overall, I could figure out that the average community college award is close to $1,500. Some of them more, some of them less. Again, it depends on what student programs your students are going into, how much Pell Grants they receive, how many other scholarships they receive, depends on what their average award is going to be. At the bottom of that table, it shows sort of how the funding broke down based upon use, and that we estimate that we're not going to use the $10 million. A conservative estimates that we might use the 4.2. Obviously, there's nobody in this room that doesn't think this program isn't going to grow significantly next year when we have more than just a few months before the start of the fall semester to do this very heavy lift. With that, I am happy to stand for any questions.
Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, thanks for this report. It's definitely is detailed and provides us lots of information. I'm looking at the table that you provided on page 9 of the community colleges, and I'm just trying to understand. It comes to be the 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth column, it says total fall expected awards, and be surprised, I went to Kansas Community College, and it says 34,000. I'm trying to figure out what that figure there means.
So that is amount for the semester we just ended that they expect to pay for. That's the scholarship amount for the fall semester.
A individual scholarship amount.
For all of their students who got the Kansas Promise Scholarship, they awarded $34,000 for fall. They are expecting to award $44,000 for spring for all of their Promise students. So they're expecting to get some more students, award a little more, and then they're expecting some students to also come in summer, which would be that $21,000 amount. So they would be able to award $21,000 in scholarships for the summer. So this is based on their projections for spring and summer based upon who has the Promise Scholarship. But for fall, they were estimating awarding the $34,000.
So that's the total amount of scholarship?
All of their students that qualified for Promise.
But when I look back, and based upon, so the second column, based upon percentage enrollment in eligible programs for the year, there's a $639,000 figure.
Correct. So think about if we divided the money based upon just head count, that doesn't take any financial need into consideration. So KCK has many students in programs, but they also have many students who would qualify for a lot of Pell Grant. So that's why their number has been adjusted downward so much, is because the people who have a lot of need covered by the federal government are going to receive less state general fund Kansas Promise dollars. So the numbers originally did not factor in so much that high poverty rate that KCK has. They also may have more students in less expensive programs.
Okay, and finally, does that impact future availability of the Promise Scholarship?
That's a very good question, and not how Senate Bill 340 is contemplating it going forward, but that's a very good question.
Senator Solontrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This would be a question for yourself or Mr. Gannett. Can you tell me why the significant disparity, in particular like the automotive technology costs, tuitions, fees, supplies, and in particular the annual totals? The programs vary that much?
Yes.
And so have you communicated with the Kansas business community and or the automotive community to know what the demand is and to have this kind of a variety of costs and fees and structure?
I've not done that. I'm going to answer, and I'm going to let Jim have an opportunity to give his perspective. So as he mentioned from the community college perspective, because we do get taxing authority for our students who are in district, so in the taxing county of the college, we get 1/3 of our funding from the state, 1/3 from our local taxpayers, and 1/3 from the students. The tech colleges don't have that taxing authority, so they're more 2/3 and then 1/3. The difference in the variety of prices is something that we have just recently begun starting to talk about. But there is a variety of prices across the state, and I don't think students know about this. From the students I've talked to, I actually had a few students call me that were interested in a tech college program, and there is a wide variety, but students have to do some research. That's why KBOR has Kansas degree stats, because sometimes the programs vary, but the cost varies pretty significantly.
It's a very good question. That's one program I'm very engaged with. At the request of the employers we work with, they wanted our students to have uniform sets of tools because they were tired of the kids showing up with grandpa's tools, dad's tools, or whatever. They also found after we started using uniform sets of tools in the programs, it helped reinforce to the students, you're going to show up on time, you're going to learn to do this right. The tools are getting more sophisticated because of the computer nature of the vehicles. In addition, for our particular automotive tech program, our students can earn up to 8 different ASE industry credentials. That's included in our cost. And to the employers, those credentials mean more than the college transcript, because those industry credentials verify this guy knows how to do a transmission, brakes, whatever. So the combination of what we teach them, reinforced by the industry credentials, the uniform tool sets, does drive the cost up, but we have a stronger job placement and more employer satisfaction. We took over at the request of Manhattan High School 3 years ago. We took over the auto tech program, took our accreditation, our faculty, our curriculum, and put it at the high school. This year, out of the 7 sections during the day, 5 of the sections are filled with automotive tech students. And it's just increased the employer interest and demand and expectations, so.
Follow-up? Yes.
Thank you. So would a student be able to discern between the programs, either automotive or ADN nursing? Because there's a significant variance there as well on trying to determine what it is that the course involves, how it can apply to them in the job market, and figure out which one they want to pursue.
And I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Heather. So in the nursing programs, again, there is that variance. That's why students they will often apply to multiple nursing programs because of the competition. When they do that, each college that I know of gives the student information and tries to set up a pre-advising session to take them through those kind of issues and information. Here's what you need to know about our program, our pass rate. Here's what you're going to experience. As Heather mentioned, the tech colleges have a bit of a disadvantage as we don't have taxing authority. So our students, at most of our institutions, 2/3 of our budget comes from students paying. We get roughly 30% or so of our revenues from the state regions. So that drives the cost as well.
In terms of nursing, the other thing to keep in mind is because they do apply to multiple schools, part of that is some of our nursing programs are full. And so a student needs to do their own research and needs to know, I probably need to apply to multiple programs, especially if I'm not top of my class. But then also our nursing programs do differ in terms of their passing rate for the NCLEX. So whether you're getting an automotive certificate for like an an associate's degree in automotive technology, or you're getting an associate's degree nurse, you have the same piece of paper and the same credential at the end. What it took for you to get that credential may be slightly different based upon the programs you go to and also the practical experience you get within those programs. So it really is important for students to not just assume one program is the same as the next program.
Committee, other questions? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here, Heather. I have some questions for down below your chart there on the graph that breaks apart the portions of the clarifications in the bill?
I think
Address a couple of those, or are we ready for that?
We're not quite ready for that.
Thank you.
I am not seeing any other questions, so thank you very much. At this time, I would like to call on Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas State Board of Regents. Are you there with us, Dr. Flanders?
I am. Chair Baumgartner, can you hear me?
Yep, and we're increasing the volume so everyone can hear you. Okay, we are ready to go.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you to all the members of the committee that, have made this legislation possible. I would say the legislation, the Promise Act, if you will, has been great for students, but it also is going to have tremendous benefit to our Kansas employers. It encourages students to take a job in Kansas, to work and live in Kansas, and I think that's certainly an important part of the legislation. I'm here today as a neutral party because our board had not seen yet the language of this statute. We'll be meeting this week, and I expect them to enthusiastically endorse how we're moving forward. I'm really proud of our team, how quickly they were able to launch this act, knowing that next year I believe it will grow. I'm also really proud of the people on the ground at the colleges. This was really a new perspective for them in terms of how to make awards, and awards vary based on an individual's financial support. And so those nuances took some time to really work out, but I thank all the people that were making this legislation successful. I also want to thank our work group as we've looked at the first year as we've come through this, and really with any legislation, the legislation is passed, and then we see how it works on the ground and try to course correct as we see needed. I want to thank the Chair Baumgartner of this committee for participating in those work groups, and also Heather and Jim at the community and technical colleges, and Matt Lindsay at the independent colleges, as we tried to work through some of the issues. We have a report I know that we'll have at the end of the month that you'll be able to see how we've done overall so far, and I'm eager to share that with you. At this time, I would just say that I would stand for any questions, but if you're ready, I could walk through some of the changes that we would ask for in the bill, but I want to do that at the time, Chair, that you'd like to do that activity.
Okay, so first of all, are there any questions for Dr. Flanders at this time? My question is, will someone from KBOR be able to be here tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because that will be helpful. This is going to take more than one day just for this hearing, and then we do intend to work it next week. What day did we come up with, Cindy? With next Tuesday is when we would work this bill. And there's a reason we want to get this up and out, is because we want everyone, we want the Board of Regents, we want our community colleges, technical colleges, and privates to have these changes up and ready to go as we work into what will essentially be the middle of the spring semester, so we can get that second wave of folks through and also get students enrolled for summer and fall. So I think at this time, let's go ahead. I'm not seeing any questions for you. Let's go ahead and move, and let's have Heather, our reviser, step us through what really is within this trailer bill.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. It's good to stand in front of you again. Senate Bill 340 amends the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act that was enacted last year. You should have access to a revisor memorandum that explains the changes in the bill in detail. I will not cover every single amendment because there are a lot of little tiny ones, but you can read about them in that memo. So I'm just going to go section by section, and section 1 is on page 1 of the bill, and that section provides the definitions for the act. There are a few small clarifications in this section, but nothing terribly substantive. Section 2 begins on page 2 of the bill and would clarify and amend the responsibilities of the State Board of Regents with regard to the Promise Scholarship Program. The bill would extend the deadline for the regents to adopt rules and regulations from March 1 of 2022 to March 1 of 2023. And additionally, the bill would clarify that scholarship applications may be accepted throughout the year and processed as in the order that they were received. It would also clarify that the terms and conditions of the Promise Scholarship agreements cannot be more stringent than the requirements that are contained in the act in front of you. And it also allows the State Board of Regents to request information from state agencies that's necessary to administer the act. This also ties in with a later amendment in section 6 that allows institutions and state agencies to provide that information to the Board of Regents. Section 2 also would allow would require the State Board of Regents to accept electronic signatures. It would require them to enforce those Promise Scholarship agreements, to collect any money that is required to be repaid under the act, and to determine if scholarship recipients have actually fulfilled the requirements of the agreement and the act. Additionally, section 2 clarifies the information required to be contained in an annual report to the legislature, and it also clarifies which associate degree programs may be designated as Promise eligible programs, which Heather touched on this a little bit in her presentation. So moving on to section 3. Currently, the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program allows eligible post-secondary educational institutions to designate an additional eligible program if that program corresponds to a high-wage, high-demand, or critical need occupation. Section 3 of this bill would amend program to field of study. This would allow institutions to designate an additional field of study, not just one program. Institutions can select those fields of study in 2 ways. First, it can designate a field of study to meet local employment needs in the areas of agriculture, food and natural resources, education and training, law, public safety, corrections and security, or distribution and logics. Second, an institution may designate an additional field of study if the programs within that field of study correspond to high-wage, high-demand, or critical need occupations, and those programs are offered as part of a field of study that such institution already has and maintains. Section 4 addresses the scholarship award amounts. Scholarship awards are the amount of program tuition, fees, books, and materials, less all other aid awarded to a student that doesn't have to be repaid. Senate Bill 340 states that aid includes grants, scholarships, or financial awards that do not require repayment, but then the bill goes on to clarify that that aid does not include benefits received from the GI Bill or any benefits or monies in a 529 account. This section would also strike the requirement that any money remaining in the Kansas Promise Scholarship Program fund after all other scholarships awarded may go to students whose family household income exceeds the maximum income allowed by that section. And by striking that statement, the money in the fund would just remain in the fund until it can be awarded to a student whose household income meets the requirements of that section. Section 4 would also state that the Promise Scholarship Awards could be awarded for up to 68 credit hours over the lifetime of the student who received the scholarship. The bill would also prohibit scholarship awards from being used to fund prerequisite classes that are not part of a Promise eligible program and remedial courses unless they are co-requisite courses. The section would also require the Board of Regents to disperse funds on specific dates based on the reimbursement requests from those institutions. The institutions would also be required to submit those requests on specific dates, and those dates are listed in the bill. Moving on to section 5. Currently, this section provides that the requirements for a student to be eligible to receive a Kansas Promise Scholarship. This bill would add the requirement that the scholarship recipient be a United States citizen. It would also allow students who have been in foster care at any time while in high school to be eligible to receive a scholarship, and would also clarify the requirements for adult student eligibility. Section 6 would require eligible post-secondary educational institutions to counsel students on the requirements and conditions of a Kansas Promise Scholarship Agreement, provide the last known contact information of students to the State Board of Regents, and also notify the Board of Regents when a student completes the program or exceeds the 48-month program completion requirement. And additionally, as I mentioned earlier, this section of the bill would allow institutions and state agencies to provide certain information of scholarship recipients to the Board of Regents for the purpose of determining whether or not a student has satisfied the requirements of the Act and the agreement, and to aid in the collection or recoupment of any funds that need to be paid back. Section 6 also explicitly states that it is the State Board of Regents that is responsible for collecting or recouping any funds that are required to be paid back pursuant to the Act. The bill would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register, and I will note, embarrassingly, there are 2 errors in this bill that I thought were cleaned up that are not. The first is on page 9 in line 13. The word determining should be in the next line after the capital A. And the second error is on page 10. All of subsection E should be stricken. That was inadvertently left in. So I apologize for those errors. And if the committee chooses to work this bill, which it sounds like it is next week, I would just ask that you consider making those changes. And I will be happy to answer any questions.
My first question is, can you go ahead and prepare those 2 amendments that are the cleanup from? Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep. Questions? So we'll start with Senator Sykes and then Senator Petty.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Tamara. My question is, we have other scholarship programs that require residency and staying after. Does KBOR also do those, or is there another agency who determines whether or not they're in compliance?
I think we'll go ahead and let President Flanders answer that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
President Flanders, did you want to go ahead and answer that?
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
The residency is determined, our institutions have different residency requirements. So if a student at a technical college, that's really a holdover from school district roots, they are an immediate resident. If they enroll at a community college, it takes longer for them to establish residency. And in statute, if they enroll in a university, that residency takes longer still. So the residency is among the institutions is not even.
Okay, I'm not sure my question was heard properly, sorry. So Dr. Flanders, my question is, there are other scholarships that we have besides the Promise Scholarship that you have to have a residency requirement after, like you stay in the state, social workers for 2 or 5 years. And if they don't have that clawback, does KBOR, are you responsible for tracking that, or is it a different agency?
So thank you. I misunderstood your initial question. We are responsible for that. One of the issues with the original Promise Act was the relationship of the student to the Board of Regents and whether or not we were able to actually have standing to make that clawback. And so that's something that we've worked with the chair of the committee, and I believe is going to be corrected in this legislation. I would note that there is an expense to that clawback. And certainly we anticipate, and we would like to see that added to this bill, the fiscal note needed to just, it's unsustainable right now, the clawback, because I do expect the program to grow. And that does mean that we'll have students that aren't fulfilling the service scholarship. And we will have to, at the board, claw back on all of those students. We hope it's small in number, but I just know from the from past experience with technical education programs, this program will grow. And so I know that we'll have time perhaps later to discuss what we recommend in that vein.
Okay, thank you. And if I may.
Okay, real quick. We're almost out of time.
Okay, sorry. My follow-up is that where this would be in applications would be open throughout the year. Is that consistent with other applications, or do we have a window of time for applications?
to enter the programs?
Yes.
Yeah, typically, the window's not as broad as this program, but here's what I tell you is different. This program is set up to really serve the needs of all students and businesses. And so I wouldn't suggest that we limit. I think the key here is the award date. And if we can and that really triggers our collection. So the award date, because community and technical colleges and independents have been very flexible, we think the best time to have an award date is when the class begins, because then there's really no wiggle room on when that period begins and when that service is needed.
Senator Petty and then Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I know we're short on time here. So Section 3, there was a question about keeping programs. Does that mean that at some institutions they're planning on doing away with some programs, and so they have to maintain the program until the promised scholarship eligibility is exhausted?
I can explain that.
Okay.
I don't mind explaining that. So again, there were the 4 categories in that umbrella, and then there was the 5th category. The 5th category, school institutions as well as legislators thought that that was going to be potentially multiple certificates or associate programs, associate degree programs. And the Board of Regents determined that that was not their interpretation, and so they made each institution pick just one certificate or one degree. So that is being changed in this legislation, and it's simply that continuation is if an institution is going to change and pivot, and I'll use Johnson County as an example, because that interpreter program, so let's say they go to something completely different, and it is, I can't even think of something, graphic design. They have to continue the interpreter scholarship until every student has completed that had already been awarded. So they have to continue to offer that until, so the students that have been awarded a scholarship can complete.
Can finish their program?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then in Section 4, about the funds not having to be exhausted, does that mean funds can be carried over from year to year?
Yeah, so I think you're looking in Section 4, that's on page 5 of the bill, starting there in line 38 where we strike. Currently, the program allows scholarship monies that are still in the fund after the awards have been made to students who meet that income threshold. Then students who are over that income threshold can receive those scholarships. And this would just strike the allowance that those students over that threshold can receive these scholarships. So yes, the money in the fund would stay there until a student who does meet these requirements is eligible to receive a scholarship.
And then my last one is just, remind me again, what's co-requisite format?
That co-requisite format. So let's say you're needing remedial math. You're going to take it as a co-requisite. So if your certificate or degree program requires college algebra, you will enroll in a co-requisite. And so you might meet 3 times a week with a college algebra professor and a cohort of 20 or so college algebra students. You will have that same professor or perhaps a different professor on 2 other days that will provide that remediation, rather than what is offered at some of our institutions where you have to take the whole series of remedial courses before you can even enroll in college algebra.
Thank you.
Senator Erickson, and this will unfortunately have to be our last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple real quick ones. I'm not going to say how long it's been since I've darkened the door of a college campus, but in my day, a program and field of study were very different things, a program being more narrowly defined than a field of study. So can you speak to, or Dr. Flanders, how this, to me, that terminology is vastly broadening this scholarship. Is that accurate? Am I understanding that correctly?
Senator, that is how we interpret the initial bill as well, is that a field of study contains many programs, but if it speaks to a certain program, that is much narrower in our interpretation. We heard later from legislators that they actually meant that a program should have been a field of study, but we're really tasked with following the letter of the law, and so that would broaden this this act.
It would broaden it only in that fifth category. It would
Correct.
make the fifth category similar to categories 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay, thank you. And very, very quickly, who defines or what's the standard for high demand, high wage, critical need occupations? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I can
So-
answer that. No, you know what? If someone else wants to, yeah.
No, does the reviser want to answer, or do you want to let?
No, I'll defer to Dr. Flanders.
Okay, go ahead.
So we've worked with the Department of Labor and Department of Commerce, and through the data, we find which fields are in not necessarily every field in demand is high wage. So we look and see what's high wage, what's high demand, and then some of the occupations fall maybe outside of that, that we also want to provide training resources for. One of those might be childcare. And so we'd say, well, that occupation is going to support so many parents and families that we're going to go ahead and label that as critical need.
I guess the one quick question I have before we lose you today is the high demand, critical need, high wage. We are talking about in Kansas. Is that correct? Is that the determination that you are going to be making, even
Correct.
though it doesn't explicitly say that?
That's how we've interpreted it so far, even though obviously there might be a tremendous need for shipbuilders perhaps. I mean, I'm trying to, something that's outside of Kansas, but we'll be looking at that for Kansas.
We're going to just say no on that.
That's the spirit. That's the spirit of the legislation.
Okay, thank you very much. So committee, we will pick up on this again tomorrow. So we will continue. So spend a little bit of time on the two spreadsheets. You have two different spreadsheets that kind of go over the changes, why they're there, and how we might want to, if we need to, edit those as well. So at this time, thank you for your participation, and the committee meeting is adjourned.